Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Trademark Sports Podcast. Today's episode is we're gonna go through and have a look at who I think is every club's most improved player this season. But before we get into that one, we'll go through and have a look at our random player of the week for this week. So this week's random player is Khalifa Loa. Now, so he actually has a really good try scoring record. So he played 75 games over 2010-2017, and he scored 61 tries, which is pretty good. He made his debut in 2010. For the Dragons in their premiership winning season, which I think is pretty cool. He then went to the Cowboys, Titans, and then back to the Dragons. He also actually played for New Zealand and Samoa, which is pretty cool. Not many people can say they've gone on to play for their country, especially a tier 1 nation like New Zealand. He's only 31, so I hope he's doing alright, but I've actually got a bit of a funny story about Khalifa Loa. So I remember seeing him just down at local footy one day, and being a massive Dragons tragic as a kid, went up and was just stoked that he was there. Went up, asked for an autograph, and he was like, "Nah, you got to beat me in a game of knots and crosses." And I was like, "Yeah, righto, I can do that. Cool." Played 3 or 4 games, and he blitzed me every single time. And then it was like, why is he not just giving me his autograph? Like, come on, it's a bit rough. Ended up finding out that he at the time couldn't write. So there's that for you. So one thing that I've seen just in the news this week is just with the World Cup, obviously the eligibilities and stuff like that's been in the news for a little while now. But I was just thinking it would be pretty cool to see if the smaller nations just be more competitive. So I did see that Valentine Holmes said he'd be more than happy to go and play for Cook Islands, and I just had the thought of. So one thing I saw the other day that Clarkey posted on his thing was talking about how Valentine Holmes said he wouldn't be opposed to playing against Cook Islands at the World Cup. And I think it would be pretty cool to see if the tier 2 nations had their selection choices first. Just gives them the best possible size they can have, and then it goes on and makes it a lot better spectacle to watch because the World Cup's more competitive. Rather than, I'm pretty sure Australia's got, I know they've got Italy and maybe Lebanon in their group in this year's World Cup, and they're gonna absolutely pump them. And you think if Italy have players like Tedesco and that running around for them, they're gonna be a lot more competitive. I think Australia, the tier 1 nations like Australia, New Zealand, and England will still have the best teams just because they have such a big selection pool. And then it's the thing Samoa would end up having Suwali, To'o, Luai, and Papali'i and that sort of thing, which they might end up having anyway. But it just makes them more competitive, gives people more of a reason to watch it because every game's not going to be a 70-0 blowout rather than the way it is at the moment. But I'm definitely not saying that this should happen. But I think it's a little cool concept idea if it did happen. But the topic of eligibility has been so up in the air at the moment, and I have no idea what they should do with it. I think at the moment it's working, so I don't know why there's a need to change it. The tier 1, tier 2 system, obviously it's not the best thing in the world, and they probably could do better, but I have no better options at the moment. So let's get on into each club's most improved player for the 2022 season, and we're just going to work through from top to bottom of the ladder. So Penrith Panthers is going to start off, and Dylan Edwards, that boy has had a mammoth year. I think he was probably heavily underrated before. I think he was always been a really good fullback, but this year he's just really accelerated that, and everyone's starting to take notice of who he is and think people are now talking about him getting picked for the World Cup for Australia, and no bum gets picked for that. So I think that's a massive credit to him and how far he's improved just over the course of his career. And the thing I love about Dylan Edwards as well, you don't see much with the fullbacks these days. He gets the ball off kicks and he just sprints back at the line, and I absolutely love it. Just trying to make the most meters for his team possible and get them into good yardage straight away. So into second, going to the Cowboys. Now, for the Cowboys, there are so many players you could pick here. So you got Scotty Drinkwater, Tom Dearden, who end up going from being palmed off by the Broncos who were struggling to an Origin player. Gilbert, Tuolangi, Holmes, and even Townsend and Tamalolo can get a shout here, but I've got to go with Ruben Cotter. He has had a ridiculously good season, especially moving positions. He was a hooker, and he was second choice then to Reece Robson. They moved him into the forwards, and he's just been lights out, gone to play Origin. He unfortunately had that injury, but he the way he's developed his game in just such a short amount of time is such a testament to him and how his work ethic, and I think he's going to go on now to have a really big career. Now the Sharkies, I think this one to me is pretty obvious. Nicho Hynes, he's gone and taken this team from missing the top 8 last year, comes in a halfback. Obviously, having Fitzgibbon there now helps as well, but they're now pushing for top 4, and it looks likely that they'll make the top 4. And I think Nico Hines has been a massive, massive part of that. So the Storm, Port Adelaide Storm have had plenty of injuries this year, but it's allowed a player like Josh King to come through and just show what he's made of. He's had a couple stints at, I think, the Bulldogs and the Knights, and it just didn't really work out for him. He's gone down to Melbourne now, and he's just solidified himself as a really crucial part of that team. I think full credit to him in turning his career around. Now the Eels, they've got a couple of players this year as well who I thought have stood out and made some improvements. But shout out to Dylan Brown. This year he's been absolutely insane. Last year he was an incredibly good defensive 5'8", but this year his attacking game has just turned on its head. That's the thing. People talking about him last couple of seasons, a bit of a attacking liability, but now you definitely can't say that. He's got the X factor just to break open games, and he's definitely done that this season. He's gone on to score. He's got 8 tries this year, and I think last year might have had 1 or 2 try assists. He's had 13 so far this year. His kicking game's improving. His all-around game's improving, and he's making the Paras attack so much more dangerous. Is that the defense have to focus on him a lot more now, and that's the thing that's opened up spaces on his outside for players like Sean Lane, who I think another player's had a really, really good season. And you're seeing now with Sivo coming back, how many tries he's scoring. So now to the Rabbitohs' most improved player of the season. This player, he was good last year, and it was a pretty crucial part of the Rabbitohs making it to the grand final, although it might have gone a bit under the radar. But Tevita Totola, in this last month or so, has especially really, really shown how much improvement he's got. I know definitely against the Sharkies, he ran for over 200 metres, and he just continues to be a bit of a battering ram, just laying the platform for the Rabbitohs side, who they've had some issues at the start of the season, but now they're really starting to click, running into the finals, and I think he's a big part of that. His game is definitely taking more and more steps up. So the Broncos are another team that have had just numerous players who have gone on to have really, really improved seasons from their last couple of years. Corey Oates comes to mind. He's gone on and playing Origin rather after being in relative obscurity for he'd been reserve grade last couple of years. Who else is there? You got Corey Jensen. Shout out to him. He's another player who wasn't really playing first grade. He's gone on to play a few games this year. Tamate Martin, Ezra Mam as well. I know he's a rookie, and you sort of expect to see that improvement so early in the career. But I think you got to give a shout out to him about how much he's improved just from his debut to now. But you can't go past Paddy Carrigan. He is now he's been their best forward this year, which is saying a lot because he plays on a team with Payne Haas, who's a top 5 front rower easy. Paddy Carrigan, he just plays with such aggression and hunger to win, which, I mean, a lot of those young Broncos boys are doing now because they had such a poor first couple of years with their win record, and they're trying to be the Broncos of old. I think it's sort of no surprise that when the Broncos aren't playing well, Carrigan isn't playing well either. And these last couple of weeks, now that he had, especially last week, when he wasn't there, I think they struggled a little bit. But yeah, just massive congratulations to Paddy Carrigan on just how much he's improved over this year. And I think the hallmark that you can see for that is the fact he went and got Player of the Series for Origin this year. He wasn't even in contention for Origin last year, or his name might have been floated as maybe a future player, get him in the camp sort of thing. And then now he's gone on and got Player of the Series, so congratulations to him. So the Rooster team, they've had a bit of a down year, but I think now that we're moving into the finals, they're starting to look like they're hitting form at the right times. They're in the top 8 now, and they're not looking like slowing down anytime soon. Especially their attack is absolutely humming at the moment. You generally do tend to see improvement in players between first, second, third year, as it's sort of meant to. But I think the form of Joseph Suwali can't go unnoticed. I think he has to definitely be their most improved. He showed potential of being a decent quality first grade player last year, but now we're really starting to see why he's been so hyped for so long, and why he's why rugby was chasing him, and there's the wars between even the NRL clubs, Roosters, Rabbitohs, why such big, large amounts of money are being thrown around for him. His athletic ability is just insane. He's just genuinely a pure athlete. These tries he's been scoring off Sam Walker crossfield kicks are just ridiculous. Just climbing up above these fully established first graders who 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years older than him, and just making them look like absolute schoolboys. I think his ceiling is ridiculous. The things that this boy will be able to do in the future, it's going to be so scary. Hopefully we don't lose him to rugby, but I think the sooner he'll be playing fullback, the better. It's going to be crazy to watch. Obviously you got Teddy there, and he'll be there till he retires. But I think Suwali, watch him maybe even get pushed into the centres next season, get closer to the ball. But his ceiling is just, like as I said, ridiculous. And I think if you look at him this season and don't think he's going to go on to be a star, I think you're kidding yourself. Now the Raiders, I think when I did this list, I was trying to have players who weren't really established first graders and sort of made a name of themselves this season, but it's so hard to look past Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders side. I think he's just really, really leading from the front in a Raiders side that for most of the year have sort of relatively struggled. I know they're in and around the 8 now and sort of putting pressure on these lower teams, but just every single week, like we saw in the All-Star game, he had a huge game and outshone James Harris, which is not easy to do. He's no bum. And then he's gone on and continued that form for Canberra this year. I think he's definitely been their best forward over the likes of Papali'i. And I think he just every single week just continues to get better and better. Unfortunately, now for himself and the Raiders season, he's gone and got a rib cartilage injury, I think it was. So he's probably out for the rest of the regular season. But I think you can't take away from that. I think he's one of my picks for the Dally and front row of the year, and he's really, really leading from the front for this Raiders team. So on to Manly now. They've had a few players as well this season who have stepped up in the absence of Turbo, but I think none more so than Ruben Garrick, changing positions from the wing to fullback. I know he's played a fair bit of fullback throughout his life, but to do it on the biggest stage in NRL is a whole different ball game. And I think he's really, really done it superbly well. The whole attacking structure at Manly has changed since Turbo's been out. I think the game's been their game plan's been more developed towards DCE and Garrick's strengths, and it's really proven himself. I think we've seen this year the extent of his attacking abilities. He's into his 4th season now in the NRL, and he's really starting to find his feet. He's in 20 games. He's had 21 try involvements. Been involved in more than a try a game. 11 tries and 10 try assists, as well as 167 average running meters. So he's really laying a good platform for the Manly side. As well as he's also broken 68 tackle busts. So he's definitely been a player that's definitely been on the improve, and as he has been for the last couple of seasons. And I think moving forward, I'd love to see Manly play him at fullback full time and have Turbo in the centres and play the floating role he does in Origin. I don't think they will end up doing that, but I think Garrick's talents will be a little bit wasted out if he goes back under the wing. So onto the Dragons now. I think they've had a couple of players have really good seasons, like Fine on the wing, as well as Cody Ramsey's done a bit since he's come back in at fullback. But Blake Laurie has to be the Dragons' most improved player this season. The Dragons' 4-pack over the last few years has sort of been dominated and made it look a little bit silly. I know they had Paul Vaughan there who's putting up big numbers, but it's sort of, I don't know, they didn't have much oomph behind that. But Blake Laurie this year is definitely proven to be that second front rower. It's like the bit of the go forward, although now he's leading the 4-pack. He had a few games in the last month or so. He's got over 200 meters. I know his consistency's probably been the only thing you can bring into question. Like he had a bit of a down game against the Roosters when they ended up getting flogged in that second half. But overall, this season he's definitely been Dragons' go-to forward, and he's really, really showing why. Because he had lots of raps coming through the grades, and this season for sure is definitely showing why that was there and proving himself to be a top quality front row in first grade. Now onto the Bulldogs. Bulldogs have had so many players this season who have really taken a step up in this second half of the season. Names such as Aaron Schopp, he's had a big year. Max King has become a household name. Kyle Flanagan even, and Jerry Marshall King. And at the start of the season, he said he wanted to become, I think, top 5 hooker in the comp, and I sort of a little bit laughed at, and I thought, I don't think he's got that potential, but full credit to him of how much he's worked on himself and his game. He definitely, I wouldn't say he's top 5 yet, but he's definitely bumped himself up a few spots. And he's a player now that the Dolphins can potentially build around for the next few seasons, get some combinations going. But you have to give most improved this year the Bulldogs to Matt Burton. He's gone on to play Origin after his name was not really floated up last year, but I think this year he's come on to Origin scene, shown that he belongs there. And then in this second half of the season, since the Dogs have been going good, I think you can definitely make the link between Burton's form and how the Bulldogs have gone. This last 3 or 4 weeks, him and Josh Adokar have made a really, really formidable attacking combination, and it's scary. And if you're a Bulldogs fan, I would be looking forward to the next couple of seasons with Burton there, because he's only going to get better. I think he's 20, 21, maybe even 22 now, but as even still, that's so young. He's got at least 10 years, barring injury, touch wood, like at the top grade, and I think it's a real testament to him of how like much he's worked on his game, because he didn't even play 5'8" last year. To now come in and start making defenders and teams look silly. I think it's really good for him. So now onto the Warriors. Unfortunately for the Warriors, they've had and Warriors fans have had a bit of a down year, and a lot of the players that started to come through the grades and look like they're going to be really good last season haven't really lived up to it again this year. But one player this year has made himself like a real part of their team, and the established NRL player is Jack Murchie. So he's gone on to he's made 12 games this year, but he's scored 3 tries in that time. He's made 289 tackles with a 93.2% tackle efficiency, which is pretty good. I think just over these last 3 weeks, like the try assist he had for Sean Johnson the other day was like magnificent. And I think from that we can see that his skill set's getting better and better. And moving on to next year is another player that the Warriors can look at for a bit of hope and push for maybe some finals footy in the next couple of years' time. And onto the Knights, once again, like these few teams down the bottom, they all had disappointing seasons, but there are a few shining lights to take from them. One of them for the Knights, I would say, would have to be the form of Dominic Young. When he first came to the comp, so to me and a couple of my mates who are Knights fans looked around and went, geez, right, this guy, I don't know what he's doing here, but he's definitely proven himself this season. He's really still only really young, but he's got the tools to be one of the best wingers in the comp. He's like tall, athletic, strong, quick. I think looking to the future, the Knights can really start to utilise him as an attacking weapon. He's gone on this year he's played 16 games this year, scored 9 tries, and he's managed to get a try assist as well. But I think we'll also have a look at, he's made 11 line breaks, 51 tackle busts, he's averaging over 130 metres. So it's a really good foundation and platform the Knights have there to build upon someone and make him into like one of the star wingers of our competition, which like their backline, like the thing on the Knights squad, their squad is really good, and like players like this are like another asset, and they can push for top 8. I can say with 100% confidence. There's a few like issues with the board and the coaching staff and stuff that, in my opinion, need to be changed. But I think, looking forward for the Knights, Dom Young is a player that you can rest your hat on and like invest in, and he's going to be a star in the future, in my opinion. Now the Tigers, this player hasn't only just been one of the most improved players for the Tigers, but he's been one of the most improved players in the competition and has stood out as one of the premier front rowers, I think, this year. Maybe not premier, but definitely one of the more hardworking and one of the better front rowers this year is Joe Ofahengaue. Credit to him, he's shining, standing out in a miserable Tigers side, especially their 4-pack. I think some of their backs, like Jackson Hastings, you give a bit of credit to him. He's definitely been one of the most improved from the last time we saw him in the NRL. And players like Adam Dewey and the last few weeks, Dane Laurie starting to stand out. But Ofahengaue, he's been putting in the work all season long. I think last week he led the Tigers for both meters gained and tackles made, which just shows you that he wears his heart in his sleeve for that club, and he's definitely an asset for them. I think he's one of the few players at the Tigers that you can just keep around and actually build a club around. I know he had a bit of time, a bit of a bad time at the Broncos, but I think now he's 27, getting into his work. He's really still going to start to hit his peak of his career the next couple of seasons. So he's played 20 games this year. So he's averaging 124 meters as well as 37, pretty much 37 tackles a game, which that's a lot of work to get through, especially in NRL with against the elite of the elite. Taking 14 runs, 994 post contact meters. Big massive shout out to him and his improvement that he's made over the last definitely over the last season or so. Down to the Titans, there's really not much positive unfortunately to say about the Titans this season, but I think one of the shining lights they've had and probably their most improved player this season has been Beau Fermor. In the absence of David Fifita's good form, I think Beau Fermor's been their strike second rower. He's got a few tries, especially at the start of the season. And I think if you can get David Fifita firing, then you've got a back row of Fermor and Fifita. You can put Tino in the front row, Aaron Clark at lock. I think there is a foundation there for a good 4-pack, and I think you got Fodawaker as well. So I think moving forward, there's definitely there's potential at the Titans. They do have a good squad, but I think it's just letting go of Fogarty a bit too soon was probably one of their biggest issues this year. But yeah, like for Titans fans, there's like positives looking forward, and Beau Fermor is definitely one of those. So onto this week's tips and previews for this round's games. We start the week off with a huge game, Panthers vs Storm, like another ripper Thursday night game. We've had a few of those in a row. But there's some big outs for both sides. No Fisher Harris for the Panthers is huge, and no Jerome Hughes for the Storm, who suffer another injury, the poor bastards. But Nick Meaney's back for them. Like, how good was Cameron Munster at fullback last week, though? Like, keep him there, surely. He's like, I reckon his best position nearly is fullback. But he's back in the halves. Cooper Johns keeps his spot. Thought he was pretty good last week. Up at Penrith, I think the Panthers get the win. Penrith backs against the wall. Their team's just so good. And they went and just made the Raiders look like a schoolboy side. So I think, Panthers get the win there. Warriors versus Bulldogs. This one is in New Zealand. Warriors, they just look a bit out of it at the moment, don't they? They got pumped again on the weekend by a good Bunnies side. And the Bulldogs, despite losing last week, like, they're humming. They're looking good, and they're really building towards a really big season next year. I think Dogs get the W again. Addo Kai, anytime try scorer. Take that to the bank. Eels versus Rabbitohs. How on earth do you tip this game? The Eels, they looked good with last weekend without Mitch Moses, and I want to give a huge shout out to Jake Arthur for his game last week. Couple of try assists, just sort of shut everyone up. Everyone was doubting him. I think there is definitely a good quality first grade player in there. I think he just got put in a bit too soon, but hopefully he can take the confidence that he played with last week and keep building on that and take the Parrot to the top 4 finish. And how good was that Wonga Blake try last weekend too? I don't know. That's just some superhuman crap that I could never do. But yeah, Rabbitohs torched the Warriors. Trell Mitt back to his best. I think even though games are Friday night at Bankwest, which is Eels bread and butter, I do think the Rabbits have enough to get over the line and deliver the goods, and especially Latrell Mitchell. So look for another try from him. Couple try assists to Alex Johnston. Once again, take that to the bank. Roosters versus Cowboys. This is an absolute belter of a game. Sunday Arvo at SCG. Like, this is rugby league. Cowboys weren't convincing in my eyes against the Dogs. I think the last two weekends have had a below standard first half. Like, Dragons were definitely, I think they were in it down by less than a try, and the Dogs were in it last weekend as well. But they grind down these teams and beat them over the back to the back end. But I don't know if they'll be able to do that against the Roosters. Roosters looked good last weekend against the Broncos. I really stepped up. They've had a really good last month of footy. In fact, they haven't lost since they had to bye. So they're really building momentum into these finals. I think they're a lock probably for the top 8. I think they can get the job done again here. So Roosters win there. Tigers versus Sharks. Sharks by loads. How else do you tip that? So the game's out in Tamworth. So if you're out there, make sure you get around to it. Although the last time I did say that Tigers were going to get flogged, they ended up beating the Broncos. But no Jackson Hastings this time. And I mean, if they're going to, they couldn't beat the Knights last week, so I don't see them beating the Sharkies. Just touching the Sharks last weekend, they had 24 errors against the Dragons and still managed to get the win, which shows two things. Shows that they got resilience and to keep in the fight, and it also shows that the Dragons are awful. But yeah, I think without Jackson Hastings for the Tigers, they look a bit ordinary, and I think they will again. Sharks get the win. Broncos versus Knights. Broncos have had a couple ordinary games in a row, which is a bit concerning, but I think, unfortunately for the Knights, I think this is the perfect time for the Broncos to go up and play the Knights. Look, Saturday night up in Brisbane under the lights, it's Broncos, that just screams a Broncos win, doesn't it? Especially this season. The Knights are an absolute shambles at the moment. The story's about infighting left, right and centre, unrest at the club, and I just think, looking at this game, they'll look at it and it's just going to be a bit too hard for them. I think Broncos, even without Carrigan, can get the win. So Raiders versus Dragons out at Canberra is a massive game in terms of the context of the top 8. I think, although in saying that, I think the teams at the top 8 at the moment will end up being the top 8. Just depends what order now. But the Dragons and Raiders have the capability to shake it up a little bit. Dragons get the win, and so if the Dragons get the win, Roosters beat Cowboys. Roosters go 4 points clear of the Raiders. So basically, as I said before, the top 8's decided. But Raiders in Canberra against a pretty poor Dragons side. I think Dragons full pack they've named this week's a bit how you going. Josh Maguire starting in the second row, which is a bit ugh. But Raiders are pretty ordinary last week against Panthers side. They started well, but just got rolled at the top of. And no Joe Tarpanay is a huge loss. But as I said, Dragon season's well and truly over now after losing to the Sharkies last week. And Tarek Sims has now played the last game for the club, which is a bit of a loss, but it's a pretty sad way, but fitting way for Sims' time at the club to be over. But yeah, Dragons are doing their yearly tail off towards the end of the year. But yeah, in Canberra, I think the Milk get the job done there. Titans versus Manly to end out the round. No Foz for Manly. Or actually, he's been named, hasn't he? Foreign. So interesting to see if he plays or not. I don't think he will. I think they'll give him a rest, especially against the Titans. But Manly desperately need a win here if they're any chance of making the top 8, which unfortunately I don't think they are now. But yeah, if they can get a win here, might be able to build some momentum and put some pressure on some teams that are floating around there. But yeah, just need a win to regain their confidence. And unfortunately for you Titans fans, I think Manly will do that and do it well. Yeah, so that's my tips for this round of footy. So if you made it this far, make sure you leave a like and subscribe on YouTube. And if you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, make sure you download it because it really helps us out there, and leave us a 5-star review. It helps us grow the podcast. But yeah, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Trademark Sports. And thanks. Have a good weekend.